A couple months ago, I decided to take a look at a very interesting franchise called Musume. A franchise that sets itself apart from the rest because of their very unique premise, being one of the very few, if not the only Spokon that actually takes stories from real life, instead of creating their own by itself. And not only that, but also adds it in a very unique format, with anime girls replacing the original participants of this type of sport, the horses. With such an out of the ordinary premise, they managed to make not only one of the most interesting Spokons that I have seen, but even one of my favorite animes and mangas ever. Every single season you will have a moment that will touch your heart very deeply and it's gonna make you really enjoy the fact that you decided to touch this franchise. However, not all of the pieces of media of this franchise are made equal. Some of them are fantastic, others are just good, and others, they exist. And as such, I decided to make a video ranking basically every single piece of media of the franchise. The way in which I will rank them is very simple. I will take every individual piece of media and I will watch every episode and every chapter that has been translated to English. As much as I would love to rank everything, sadly I do not know Japanese, and as such I will be missing a couple of different chapters for most of the mangas. If at some point all of the chapters come out in English, I will probably re-rank these, but for now there's certain limits that I cannot overcome. However, the reason to why I said that it was gonna be basically every single piece of media is because there's gonna be two major exceptions, both of which are for different reasons, but both of them that are equally as sad. The first one, and probably the most controversial one, is gonna be the video game itself. Yeah, the main material in which most of this franchise relies on, I'm not gonna count it. Why is that? Well, there's two reasons for that. The first one is the length of it. It's very difficult to compare this video game with every other piece of media. With all of the others, we have a set story with set characters that we know what we can expect. We might have something better, we might have something unexpected, but at the end of the day, we know which are the limits. With the video game, that doesn't happen. The true quality of the video game basically relies in every single character that is in the game. Not only one individual story, but all of them. Not only would be extremely unfair considering that I would have basically over 50 main stories, but that is only in the international release. Because if I want to go for the real amount, I would have to go for the entirety of the game in the Japanese release, which has way more characters, and I would go well over the triple digit stories. And that would mean that I would have to either butcher most of the stories because there are certain characters that I have not had, but also the fact that it would be so clearly above and beyond everything else. The second reason, and the easier to understand, is that this is a video game. Every other piece of media of the franchise is not interactive. You are either watching it or reading it. Unlike that, a video game actually forces you to do something in order for you to achieve the goal. If you fail, the game is gonna fail as well. And as such, I don't think that it's fair to compare it with a story in which you can actually alter the events eventually. Not only is unfair, but also would go against the sheer nature of this franchise to try to portray the real life stories in a very unique format. If you're still not convinced by this, well, I'm sorry. If anything, you can count this at number 1 spot by default. And the other piece of media of the franchise that is not gonna appear in this video, and is truly painful for me to say, is the Musume Pre-Derby comic anthology. I try finding it basically everywhere. I tried asking in Discord servers, I tried googling it, I tried even in Facebook groups, and none of them have any idea of where this comic is. There's only one singular chapter that has been translated, and it doesn't seem that it's gonna have any others anytime soon. And I think that it's very unfair to compare a singular chapter with several different other pieces of media that are either completed or very close to it. And as such, I'm very sorry, but comic anthology is not gonna appear. And with those two exceptions out of the way and all of the explanation that I have made, let's start with... Out of all of the pieces of media of the franchise, the one that has the dubious honor to being the weakest of them all is Umayuru Pretty Grey. Now we'll take a quick moment to try to explain you what this part of the franchise is all about. The part that I call the Umai series, which consists of both Umayong and Umayuru, basically is a chibi version of the character that we have known so far. This is something that was very common in the early and mid 2010s, with several different franchises getting a chibi version in which instead of going through the serious story of its own franchise, they go for a way more lighter tone and usually comedy. And the Umai series is not different. Instead of going for the regular stories and serious stories, they take a quick look at basically every possible character that has or has not appeared in the regular series. It not only is a very calm experience, but it also helps you to get certain different interactions that you might have never seen if you have only seen the regular anime, and even certain characters that you might not know that they exist if you haven't played the video games or if you haven't seen the full stories. And as such, the Umai series fully relies in two specific factors: how funny they are and how unique the interactions that they portray are. So if it's lacking in one or the other, it's gonna drop significantly, in a ceiling that by itself is not extremely high. And now that I have explained it to you, every time that we pass through one of these, I will make a short mention as to why I think that it's ranked higher or lower. In the case of Umayuru Pretty Grey, is simply the least interesting. Not only is the shortest piece of media of the franchise, having only 4 chapters of 3 minutes apiece, but also is the one that has the least amount of interesting interactions. Out of the 4 episodes, 3 of them show groups of characters that we have already seen in multiple pieces of media, and combine that with the fact that this has the by far weakest set of comedy, and with all of that in mind, you have what is the least interesting, least important, and most forgettable piece of media of the entirety of the franchise. In the second to last spot on the list, we have what is, in my opinion, the most disappointing piece of media of the franchise, the BMW no Chikai special. The BMW special follows a very interesting concept in which instead of going for a regular real life race, we go for a relay race in which we have 3 teams of 7 different horses, all of which are gonna be competing alongside each other to try to win something. It is very interesting because all 21 characters are actually playable Umas in the video game, and some of them characters that are yet to even appear in any piece of media of the franchise outside the video game. As a shared concept, it's very cool because you can have a whole bunch of different characters that you would not be able to see otherwise in another serious piece of media of the franchise. But there is one big issue with this one, and is that this is the BMW special. The BMW trio is a set of 3 different characters in all Biwa Hayahide, Narita Taishin, and Winning Ticket, all of which were the winners of the Triple Crown of 1996, if I'm not mistaken. They are the 3 Triple Crown winners in one specific year, and the BMW special doesn't rely on them at all. Out of the very short 3 total chapters that this piece of media has, only in one of them they are actually the focus, and in 2 of them they don't even fully appear. In fact, they are so forgettable that the best part of this whole special is the 12 billion yen incident, which is completely relying in Gold Ship, that was a horse that was yet to even be alive at the point that all of these horses retired. So this is basically a fan service type of story that came out right after the first season of the anime, when the game was not even alive yet. So they made a funny piece of media that is a fan service one without being a good fan service. I genuinely do not know why they decided to do it so early in the history of this franchise. But regardless, I think that it was a huge misplay, and I think that it was very bad, but at least it was more interesting than Umayuru Pretty Grey. Barely. The next one is gonna be Umayong Extra. This is the second season of the Umayong anime, and it follows one of the capital scenes that was made by Umayuru Pretty Grey. Even though it has a good set of new characters that we are yet to see in any other piece of media so far, they are easily the weakest stories in all of Umai as a whole. They are way less interesting than the others that we are yet to see, And even though some of them might be slightly more interesting or slightly funnier, this is by far the least funny piece of media of the franchise besides Umayuru Pretty Grey, and as such, I have to keep it at a low spot. The next spot in the list is gonna go for Haru Urara Gambaru. This is the first piece of media of the franchise overall, and as such, I think that it has a couple of really cool ideas. Instead of going for the always optimistic type of character that was the Haru Urara that we saw in future installments of this franchise, this one is way less of a full-on, always happy type of girl. She was always constantly annoyed and or angry, and she was always getting a temper tantrum, which make it a way more interesting character that actually kinda develops on her own story. There is where the things stop being good. In this 10 chapter manga, the whole focus is not in the race, but rather in fan service. There is a lot of fan service, and not particularly great. It's not very interesting, and for some reason Haru Urara has a bro complex. Yeah, I don't know why, but she has. And as such, it fails to portray what would eventually be the whole point of this franchise. Now, because of this being the first piece of media of the franchise, and actually having the first time that we saw some legitimate character development in any character, it will stay very low, but not as low, just because it has something of character development. Barely anything, but something nevertheless. We have the last 3 pieces of media of the already mentioned Umai series, with all Umayon, Umayuru, and Umayon the manga. All 3 of them are here for the exact same reason, but the ranking slightly differs depending on certain different aspects. The Umayon anime is at the bottom of the list because even though it's the start of everything, is by far the least polished of all of these ones. The Umayuru anime falls slightly higher because it actually has what is, in my opinion, overall the best set of stories, and the characters actually have some depth to it, and we actually have the closest thing to a pseudo main protagonist in the Umayuru series and the Umayon series, with both Tanino Gimlet and Symbolic Creases. But the reason as to why they are not in the top is because the Umayon manga is simply way longer. It has over 4 times the amount of stories that the Umayuru anime has. And as such, even though the quality overall of the Umayuru stories is slightly higher, the amount of acceptable stories that the Umayon manga has puts it slightly above the rest. Now, in the 12th spot in the list, we go for the Musume Pre-Derby Anthology Comic Star manga. Do you remember how I mentioned that there was gonna be no way in which I can rank the anthology comic? Well, for some reason, this franchise doesn't have 1, but rather 2 anthologies, and as such, I can at least rank one of them. This manga follows a very unique path even within the franchise as a whole. Instead of going for either the full comedy side of things or going full on for a serious story, it falls kinda in the middle. The whole point of the anthologies is that multiple different mangakas are gonna come and try to do something with the IP and the characters that appear on it. And as such, every single mangaka is gonna have a different idea. Some of them are gonna have funny stories, some others are gonna have funny with slightly interesting part of things stories, and some of them are gonna go for genuinely serious stories that sadly are only 1 single chapter long. Because of this unique combination, we have one of the very few pieces of media franchise that is technically mostly in the comedy side of things, but that also gave us some interesting character development, with multiple different stories that actually develop certain different characters, and it's something that is very appreciated. It might not be the best, but if you are a fan of the franchise, I totally recommend it, because it's worth watching and I think that is kinda cool. Now, in the 11th spot on the list, and barely missing the cut for the top 10, we have what is actually the first main piece of meat of the franchise, in the Uma Musume Pretty Derby first season of the anime. I don't think there is a controversial take to say that the first season is by far the weakest, even though it has some very interesting things to it. It's a very interesting setup season that gave us most of the important characters that are gonna be part of Team Speak Up for the seasons 2 and 3. It gave us all of the basics, it also gave us a rough idea of how the comedy was gonna work, and even though Special Week is a weak protagonist, it actually has some interesting moments behind. And combining that character development that Special Week does have in this season, alongside an actual interesting story behind, I think that it still deserves to be above every of the other things that we have seen so far. In the number 10 spot in this list, we go for Starting Gate Uma Musume Pretty Derby. Starting Gate was the first full-on manga that ever came out from this franchise. Instead of just being a 10-chapter manga like the Haru Urara Gambaru one, it actually had over 40 different chapters, and it actually developed the relation between Special Week and Silent Suzuka. Not only that, but it's also a piece of media that actually develops a couple of different characters. It's not only, in my opinion, the so far best version of both Special Week and Silent Suzuka, but it's one of the very few times that we actually see the development of both Vodka and Scarlet, which is very appreciated. The only downside of this piece of media is that it's not an Uma Musume manga. In the over 40 chapters of the manga, there's only a total of 3 real races in this whole manga. And this is not a regular Uma Musume story, but instead is way closer to being a stereotypical high school slice of life story. I think that it works very well, especially because some of the already mentioned characters are misutilized in the future, but it's still not the reason to why the franchise became popular. And even though I personally believe that this is better than the first season, it's still not an Uma Musume story. At number 9, we have what might be the most obscure piece of media of the franchise, Uma Musumeshi. Uma Musumeshi is a very weird manga. Just like how the comic anthology Star doesn't fall in either of the two categories already mentioned, this one doesn't fall either. But instead of being a hybrid between serious stories and comedy, it actually goes for the wholesome side of things, with several different characters bonding with each other thanks to food. You will see very interesting combination of characters that will grow closer to each other thanks to an interesting dish that will represent one, the other, or both. It is not a very insightful story. Most of the stories are just cute to watch, but they are very cute because they actually make the characters feel real. Even if it's not something insane, it is very cute to watch, and it's something that I am personally happy that I read, because I wouldn't have been able to know that this type of manga is actually kinda something that I genuinely like. Now with number 8 is when we start with the actual series stories, and all of the pieces of the franchise that most people would agree that are very good. And sadly, the worst of the best has to go to someone, and that one is Road to the Top. Road to the Top is a fantastic story, don't get it twisted. The story of the Triple Crown winners of 1999, which includes TM Opera O, Admire Vega, and Narita Top Road, is a fantastic one. It's the first time that we see the actual fantastic animation of Cygame Pictures. It is also the first time that we go into the full-on serious type of story. But sadly, this one just falls in the category of not being long enough to be way higher. Yeah, the animation is very great, even the character development is very good, but sadly, this is only a 4-chapter OVA. And similar to the BMW special, it falls with 3 different characters, and as such, you do not have more than 2 episodes of development for the one that has the most. And as such, a story that has a lot of potential and manages to fulfill its potential sadly leaves a lot in the terms of length, because it could be better. It is great, but could be so much better if we had the time length. Now if this was in terms of how good it is relative to the time on screen, this might even crack the top 5. But sadly, because that is not how it works, we will have to leave it at this part on the list. At number 7, we have one of the only two pieces of media of the franchise that are still currently airing in the manga Uma Musume Pre-Derby Star Blossom. Star Blossom is a very interesting manga. It follows the story of the rise to glory of the character called Sakura Laurel. She is very interesting within the roster of protagonists, and the stories that we have seen so far are also very interesting. But sadly, the reason why it doesn't fall way higher on the list is because, similar to Road to the Top, it falls into a shorter type of story. This manga so far has only roughly 50 something chapters that have been translated, and as such we are way too far from the actual most important points of the story. To put in context, the manga of Cinderella Grey went over 200 chapters long, and the things that we saw in the anime are roughly the chapter 90. With that in mind, you can understand why it's so low. It has the potential to be very close to Cinderella Grey. It might even be second on this list when it's all said and done, but for now, this is the spot that can fall on. And now for a 6th spot on the list, and something that might be slightly surprising for some of you, is Uma Musume Pre-Derby, the 3rd season. I personally believe that the 3rd season is very underrated. The story of Kita-san Black is very good. And even though some of the secondary characters are not great, others, oh my god, they truly are fantastic to watch. That scene of Chevalgran finally winning against Kita-san Black is amazing. Regardless, I think that this is a very good but oftentimes overlooked part of the franchise because of what came out right before it. But still talking about it, I think that the main protagonist of Kita-san Black is great. I actually believe that Kita-san Black is the 2nd best main protagonist in the whole franchise, and the stories overall I think that are very good. And the retirement part probably is the reason why I put it so high, but it truly resonated with me. Someone that has seen a lot of sports in the past, watching one of the legends retiring feels very rough in your heart. And now, finally reaching the top 5, with some of the actually outstanding pieces of media of the franchise, we go with Uma Musume Cinderella Grey. Cinderella Grey is what happens when this franchise decide that they can go all in. And oh my god, it's so good. This anime looks fantastic. It might genuinely be the best animation of any spoken series, period. It also has some great character moments. Both Obey Your Master and Tamamo Cross are fantastic rivals that are genuinely enhancing the whole experience. But the main thing of all of this is Oguri Cap. She is fantastic of what we have seen so far, and she is extremely funny as well. Oh my god, look at those faces. She is so hilarious. I want to die and I want to pinch her cheek, look at her, oh my god. Now with all of this praise, you might be wondering how in the world I was not able to put it way higher on the list. And I will just say that that should tell you how good the top 4 is. Now in the top 4 on this list, it goes to the easily most unexpected placement in this whole list, which is the manga called Pisu Pisu Supi Supi Golshi-chan. Golshi-chan is the only piece of media of the franchise that follows a very different path to every other thing that we have seen in the top 10. This is not a serious story. This is not even a full-on continuous story. This is a full-on comedy, kinda like Uma Young and Uma Yuru. So how in the world this managed to be over the fantastic Uma Musume Cinderella Grey? Well, it's because it might genuinely be the funniest manga I have ever read. Every single point of this manga is absolutely hilarious. I'm a huge fan of comedy, and I am gonna be very grateful to see something that truly makes me laugh. Some of the Umayon stories are good, but none of them are fantastically hilarious. But Golshi-chan is different. Every single chapter is making me cry out of how funny they are. In fact, if it wasn't because I have so much respect for the other top spots in this list, I wouldn't even dare to put it at top 2. Because it is that funny that a franchise that has some of the greatest stories in Spokon is able to have a manga that is funnier than basically everything else. With all of that in mind, I hope that you understand why I put it so high. You might not agree, but come on, it's Golshi-chan. Now for the bronze medal of this entire list, we have to go for the best animation period in this entire franchise, which is the beginning of a new era movie. Beginning of a new era was the true showcase of how fantastic this franchise can be. Road to the Top was the prototype and it worked just fine, but this one was on another level. The story that follows Jungle Pocket on her basically impossible task to defeat the monster that is Agnes Tachyon is simply spectacular. The characters are by far the most consistently great in the entirety of the franchise, enhanced by the fact that it's just a movie that manages to make it so it's way easier to have great characters if you focus in just a couple of them. This is also the by far greatest animation that any Spokon has had, and that is not even debatable, and as I'm saying, the story is fantastic. All of the characters feel alive and feel very unique on their own ways. Manhattan Cafe, Agnes Tachyon, Kiseki Fuji, Jungle Pocket, even Dansu Flame as a supporting character is very good. Basically every character that has a relatively major role is fantastic, and I love them because of that. And with all of that in mind, I think that you understand why this franchise is so great. Because all of the things that I just said are just barely enough to put it in the top 3, and not close to the top 2. For the silver medal and the second best piece of meat of the franchise, we go for Uma Musume Pretty Derby second season. Second season is just outstanding. Now, it doesn't have certain things that other pieces of media have. This is not the best animation of the franchise. In fact, basically everything that came after, including the third season, have a way more polished and better animation. So how does this story compensate? Well, by having the by far best animated story that we have seen of this franchise, and one of the greatest of any Spokon, the story of Tokai Teiyo, her eternal struggles. This is just outstanding. This is absolutely magnificent. We can even talk a little bit about the fantastic arc of Rice Shower before even touching what is Tokai Teiyo. She is phenomenal in her one arc, showing something very unique to sports in which you can be hated just by being too good, which is something that a lot of them suffer in real life, and I really appreciate that they are able to portray it. But the main focus of this season is easily the injuries, how one injury can derail your career, and how multiple of them can come and pile up and make a toll in both your body, but also your own heart, your own brain, and your own soul. You will feel hopeless, you will feel like you cannot do it anymore, yet for some reason you keep going, because that's why you are here. That's what Uma Musume is all about. Despite the fact that everything can be bad, just keep moving forward. Even if your biggest rival and your closest friend retires due to an injury, you have to try it. And this is why this franchise is so good, because it is like the real life athletes, that they might see the painting on the wall, yet they can still try. They keep going. Even if Mejiro McQueen retires because of an injury, Tokai Teiyo keeps moving forward, even if she had to suffer injuries time and time again, even if she knows that it's impossible for her to reach her full potential, even if everything feels like it's falling apart. She can keep going. And even with all of that in mind, and how injuries can derail your entire career, miracles can happen. This is one of the highest highs in the history of animated Spokon, and I truly believe it. It is insanely good. And I haven't even mentioned other fantastic moments of this season, like the last race of the Triple Crown, or the Twin Turbo race. Basically, this season has so many fantastic moments individually that it is fantastic. If it wasn't because it has certain in-betweeners that are slightly weak, this would be an all-time great story. And even with them, I personally believe that it is. But even with all of that in mind, there is one thing that is better than that. One of the, if not the greatest Pokemon manga ever written. If you know anything about this franchise, you knew that this was coming. The number one spot can only go to Musume Cinderella Grade the manga. And I even tried to make it fair to the competition, and I considered that everything of what appeared in the anime was gonna count only for the anime, and as such the manga would be forced to have only 130 episodes, or 130 chapters actually, of its 210, and it didn't matter. This is the epitome of what this franchise can be. The art style is absolutely gorgeous. The story is absolutely phenomenal. Every individual arc feels fantastic, with so many different characters that are developing and evolving and becoming better versions of themselves. How we have arguably and my favorite arc of what I have seen in any Spokon in the Japan Cup of 1989, and how we see the fall of grace from one of the greatest horses in Japanese horse racing history, and how that horse, called Oguri Cap, manages to go back from the ashes to become once again the best horse in its entire country. I can say countless things about this story. I can say hundreds, thousands, actually million things about how good this specific piece of media is. I truly believe that this is not only one of the best Pokemon mangas ever, but one of the best mangas, period. And because of how good it is, and I'm not just saying it because I like it, I truly believe it. With all of the things that we have seen, with so many great moments, with the fantastic animations, some of the greatest individual character development moments, the most unique aesthetic out of any Spokon, with all of that, even then, Musume Cinderella Grey, the manga, managed to go above and beyond to become one of the best experiences that you can have in Japanese media as a whole. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, talking about more Musume content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It not only helps the channel to grow, but will also make me very grateful that you like this amazing content. And as such, once again, I hope that you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Bye bye. Umai.